So I made a list. I made this, I think, 2 years ago, of psukim on the Megillah that have my motem on them. I found, going back till the Alter Rebbe, 81 Dibur HaMaschals. 81. Wow. 81 different titles, my motem, just based on the Megillah. Not talking about Purim, just based on the Megillah. 81. Some of them are rare. My motem from the Alter Rebbe, which he said once, no one ever heard about. Like there's a maimon that begins kharpas. Isn't that exciting? There's a maimon that begins the kinds of material that Ahasuerus used in his party, the different materials that he used. There's a maimon that begins There's a lot of them Dibur HaMaschals are quite interesting. So I have this list, which is very long. If it wasn't so long, I'd give you all a copy of it, but it's just a waste of paper. And I'm going to go through a few psukim. That's all I'm going to do. If you have 81 Dibur HaMaschals on the Megillah, I don't know most of them. I didn't learn the Maimorim. I went through from the Alter Rebbe till the Rebbe, all the Maimorim and put him, and all, as much as I was able to find. And I wrote down the names of the Dibur HaMaschals in order. And I got around 80, which is remarkable. I just want you to know that there's more than one Dibur HaMaschal, one pasuk in many cases. Like Yehoudim Hoysa Oira is one maimed, then there's a maimed which is called Simcha, there's a maimed which is called Sasin, and so on, you know. So the 81 Dibur HaMaschals that I found, and this is all very rudimentary, it's not thorough. I didn't prepare this thoroughly. But that's what we're going to do. I'm going to start from the beginning and we'll go through just a few Dibur HaMaschals of the Megillah. It never finishes, but we'll start. What we cover. Obviously, it'll be a davar shalom. Whatever we learn is meaningful and significant in itself. But I want to do something a little bit different. Like I said, I made this list before. I've used it before. So I'm sort of getting a little better at it. Every time I use it, I add more notes. So it becomes to make a little bit more sense. The most important thing you have to understand about the Megillah, this is of course preliminary, is that in the Megillas Esther never once does it say the name of Hashem, which is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. People write the name of Hashem in a letter. People mention the name of Hashem in a greeting. Here you have one of the Chavdal Tzvarim. It's one of the 24 books of Tanakh, right? It's one of the Chamesh Megillas, as it's called. Never once is the name of the Eibishter mentioned, not a single time. The story is told about people without the presence of the Eibishter inside at all. Now you do have Tefillah, Sakve Efe, Sakve Yutzad Larabim. At the end you have the Jewish people celebrating the miracle, but the Eibishter's name isn't mentioned once. And of course the Chassidus behind the fact that the Eibishter's name is never mentioned is because every word is Hashem's name. The whole Chiddush of the Megillas Esther is that Teva itself is a nest. That's the Vart. In the Megillas Esther, if you read the story of the Megillah, Mefarshim, it is a very typical story of intrigue and politics and power play. It happened 1,000 times in history. If you ever studied the history of Egypt during the Ptolemaic kings, just for an example, when a king died, he left a bunch of kids, a bunch. And the rule was the one who ascended to the throne killed every single one of his brothers and sisters. It was just life. Can you imagine? So one of the most dreadful things was to be a prince. You lived in royalty and you knew that either you were going to have to kill all your brothers and sisters or you would have to be killed. That was just the way it was. And any place in the world that you went where you had, let's speak in a language which you guys can relate to, a centralization of power. You know, we have Putin-like power, where one person has so much control and there's no checks and balances. This is what happens. Well, Ahשוirosh was the ultimate man of treachery. Ahשוirosh came to the throne by killing untold numbers of people. He wasn't a nice, sweet, bubbly guy like they make him sound in the tapes. He was a ruthless man who killed his way to the top, and he had no authority. He wasn't royalty. He married royalty. Vashti was Belshazzar's daughter, and he did the unthinkable. He murdered her. Yasher Koyach. So, when you read the Purim story, there's nothing about it that should surprise anybody, except that it involves a group of people called Yehudim, who were thrown to the wind, thrown to the wolves, and then the whole plot spins. And v'napechu, right? That's what the Megillah says. V'napechu, it's really true. The Megillah, the story you put him is v'napechu. Everything that Haman tried in bringing about the destruction of the Jewish people was the miracle. I'm going to say that one more time. Everything that Haman tried in destroying the Jewish people, that itself turned out to be the miracle, beginning with throwing the poor, continue with making the gallows, and on and on. Everything Haman tried became the Nes. So in the Megillas Esther, you don't have the name of Hashem because Hashem is not on the outside of the story, affecting change in the world. Hashem is the story. The world itself is Hashem. What we call a Nes HaMelubash B'Teva, a miracle concealed in nature. There's no mention of the Eibish's name because every single word is Shema Yisrael HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is the name of Hashem. That's what makes the Megillah so special. When you step back and you look at it, you say, oh my gosh, amazing. Go ahead.
Why would Vashti's family, like if Vashti came from royalty, give her to Ahasuerus?
It wasn't exactly that way. Ahasuerus took her. Now you're wondering why would she agree to marry him. So, how do I say this? Welcome to the real world. She didn't have any choices.
That's what I didn't ask from her perspective.
And she was also probably herself no tzadekis. You know what I'm saying? She was also pretty ruthless. And she did her share of hurting people. It's hard for us, Americans, who are the founders of democracy in the world, to understand what it means a monarchy and to understand what they used to call in the ancient world divine right. Kings saw themselves as like gods. They were better than everybody else. The people were literally their property and their, you know what I'm saying? So this is how it was. I mean, marriage was all about business. That's all it was. And it was business. Ahasuerus and Vashti was business. Anyway, so this is the first point, that in the Megillas Esther, you never have the name of Hashem. And this leads to the second point. The second point is, who needs the first Perek? Who needs it? Why do you have to have the Perek in the Megillah, which tells the story about Ahasuerus making a party? Get this, you ready? You ready? Drum roll, please. 180 days. 180 days non-stop eating and drinking. It's a half a year. A lot. It's a lot of alcohol. It's a lot of brain cells. It's a lot of destroying your body through largesse. Through you're serious. I'm also serious. It's incredibly, what's the word? There's no word in English to denote it. It's gluttonous. It's perverse. It's excessive. It's meshugeh. And the guy started in the beginning and came out at the end. Then there was some zechilentos. Do you know this guy's know how to eat and drink and party? 180 days. 180 days. 180 days. 180 days. Who cares? Why is that part of the Megillas Esther?
Because he gave the money to it.
And then, of course, at the end of the 180 days, that's not true. I mean, a second party. What do they call it? What is the word I'm looking for? A manis party. Just a week. Just 7 days. And the party for 7 days, he invited the locals, the Shushan Chevra, the people of Shushan Abina, who probably had been servicing the feast for 180 days, taking out the alcoholics, cleaning up the mess. I don't know what they were doing. And the Yidden went to that feast. And in the Gemara, they actually bring a number of opinions. First of all, where the miracle starts, Teikfei Shel Nes. And the Gemara, there's also a number of opinions from where we should read. We read from the word Vihi, from the very first word. And of course, the answer is the same. Because every detail of the Megillah is part of the Nes. The things in the story that seem so ancillary, seems so who cares, set up the Nes. Right? When you learn that Ahasuerus calculated the 70 years is the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And Ahasuerus knew that after 70 years, the second Beis HaMikdash is going to be built, because that's what the Navi predicted. According to his calculations, in the 3rd year of his reign, the 70 years ran out. That was the party. So all of a sudden it becomes very, very important. And again, since the whole construct of the Megillah is that Teva itself is Elokus, that Teva itself demonstrates godliness, it's understood, it's quite logical that you have to tell the story, even the parts of the story that are not the miracle, but it's a part of the series of events which add up to the incredible name. I find this ironic, really ironic. The Gemara says, and it's brought in the Psukim, that when Esther wanted to write the Megillah, at the very, very end of the Megillah, when Esther wanted the Megillah, the Chachamim were against it. And they were against it, they were afraid of anti-Semitism. They were afraid that Goyim are going to see that the Jews are celebrating their demise and their victory, and it's going to bring back pushback. And Esther's response was, Haloi hein ksuvim al sefer mother yuparas. We're not showing up anybody. There's a record of this in the royal families, in the ledgers and the records of Mother Uparas. There's no reason for us to record the story. Now, what's crazy about this is there is no historic Purim, period. The only source of Purim is the Megillah. It's so weird that where the Navi says that the heter to write it is because the Goyim have already written it, it doesn't exist. It does not exist. Now, don't get nervous. You can still be believers in Torah and in God. Don't get nervous. Don't get worried for a lot of reasons. Because there's a lot of things about that era that are very, very, very veiled in confusion in terms of chronology, how things happened and when things happened and where things happened and over how much time they happened. According to Torah, these things happened at an incredibly rapid rate, very, very quickly. And as the expression is in English, history is written by the victor. If the Persian Empire fell shortly thereafter, which is a controversial statement in itself, but it's how we see it, because the Greeks took over Persia in a relatively short time, it's very, very reasonable that they would have destroyed parts or all of Persian history. So there are ways of explaining why these Sefer Mother Uparas don't exist. It's possible that we'll still find them. One of the things about historians is whatever they know is true, whatever they don't know is automatically false until they find more evidence. So maybe it's possible that these Sefer Mother Uparas will one day emerge. We never know. But it's interesting that in the Tanakh, it's the only place in the Tanakh where they say the reason we were allowed to write this in Sifrei Kodesh is because it's already written in Sifrei Choil, and it's not written in Sifrei Choil. I find it very ironic. Okay, so the first pasuk, ויהי בימי אחשוירוש, הוא אחשוירוש, המלך of Yehudi Vatkush, Sheva, v'esrim, umeya Medina. ויהי, the Gemara says, ein ויהי ela loshen tzar. There's ויהי and there's v'hoya, right? What does ויהי mean? And it was. What does v'hoya mean? And it will be. There's a rule in Tanakh. The Gemara says this. Whenever it says vayhi, it happened, it's bad. It's loshen tzar. Any place where it says v'hoya, it will happen, like v'hoya im shamoya, is loshen simcha. But there's a lot of reasons why this is, including the fact that the Chazal have a Masorah, that when the Nevi'im use the word vayhi, they're describing tragic events. But the simple explanation for vayhi is loshen tzar, and v'hoya is loshen simcha, is because the future has infinite possibility. The past, no matter what it is fixed. Can't change it. So when the Navi says Vayhi, and it was, the Navi is describing something which is not, you can't do anything with it. It already is. That alone shows on a narrowness, on a containment, and a limitation. So the book of Esther begins Vayhi, and it was Biimei Achashverosh of Achashverosh. Now, first comment, and you probably know this, that in the Gemara it says that every time it says Hamelech, it means Hashem, right? You know this, right? Every time it says Hamelech, it means Hashem. But it says in Midrashim, and it's certainly in Kabbalah, that every time it says Achashverosh, it also means Hashem. Yeah. In the Gemara it says, when it says Hamelech, it means Eibishter. And in the Chazal, it's brought in Kabbalah and Chassidus, that when it says Achashverosh, it also means the Eibishter. And the remes is that Achashverosh stands for Hamelech Sha'acharis V'Reishis Shalo. Achashverosh is an acronym. The king. Achrit V'Reishit Shalo.
No, where it says that Achashverosh is...
In a Medrash, and it's brought in Kabbalah. Acharis V'Reishis Shalo. The king, who the past and the future is his. Now if you think about it, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, the whole meaning of Vayhi means you're talking about the past, which is unfixable, and then it's b'mei Achashverosh, a king who is the balabayas over the past and the future. One thing that I want to add, this is where you have in Chassidus, this is not in Nigle, and you can find a source for it in Sifrei Chakira also, that it says in the Maimonim, and you may have learned this, Chassidus means to be silent and speak. To be silent and speak. Achashverosh's name, if you break it down, can come to mean silence and speech, quiescence and noise. And of course it's two madregas. The higher madrega is the madrega of silence. The lower madrega is the madrega of noise. Meaning to say, on the highest levels, the Eibishter doesn't change. In the Eibishter's relationship with the world, there is constant change. And those are all details in how I translate the word Achashverosh. He Achashverosh, in terms of Achashverosh, who was a Moilech Mehoidevat Kush, he ruled the whole world from one extreme. Hoidevat Kush, translated literally means India to Ethiopia. You know where India is? You know where Ethiopia is? It's a couple of miles, right? Ethiopia is in Africa, and India is in deep in Asia, right? And he ruled Mehoidavat Kush. He was a very, very powerful king. There's many different opinions. Point is, he ruled over many peoples, and he ruled over many different types of peoples. He was a powerful man. The Gemara says there were Asara Meshli Bekipa. There were 10 kings who ruled over the whole world. One of those 10 was Shlomo HaMelech. One of those 10 is Ahasuerus. And of course, the last of those 10 is Mashiach. Ahasuerus was an incredibly powerful man. He ruled over the entire world. And that's the meaning of a Melech Ben Kush. And of course, Sheva ve'Esem u'Meya is the same number of states as Sarah had years, right? 127. Sarah lived 127 years. There are the Muslim involved in this as well, as you would explain it all, al pi Kabbalah. But the Chassidus of this pasuk, or to give you, how many songs are there for Purim? A lot. How many people have a niggin on the word Vihi Bimei Achashverosh? I mean, you couldn't find a worse pasuk. Or I guess, Yossi Mamelach Achashverosh Mas. You know, you make a song out of Achashverosh collecting taxes, which who cares? In Lubavitch, only Lubavitch, this is our niggin for Purim. Shoshana's Yankiv is too convoluted. No one knows how to sing it. What else do we sing? Like Yehoudim Ha'isaid, it's not Yehoudim Ha'isaid is not a Lubavitcher niggin. There's a bunch of them, but we don't own one. The Lubavitcher niggin for Purim, which most people sing without the words, is V'hi B'mei Achashverosh. I mean, it's typical. You know, what would you expect of Lubavitch? You know, and of course the answer is the same. V'hi B'mei Achashverosh, Hu Achashverosh HaMelech Me'edavat Kush, Sheva ve'Esem Mea Medina is saying, Olam Keminhag Noyig. There's a world. And the world is behaving in what appears to be a completely natural way. And it belongs to God. Achrish v'reishis shalei. It belongs to the Eibishter. There's Sheva, ve'esem, umeya, Medina, there's Mehoido, ve'akush. It's all Hashem. And that's the song. The song, V'hi B'mei Achashverosh, I don't know why they chose this pasuk. I'm going to make a big assumption, which is a big chutzpah. You're going to go home and say, Paltiel said he doesn't know what he's talking about. Whenever you're not sure about where the Lubavitch niggin comes from, you can assume it's the middle of Rebbe's Kapelye. Especially a song like this. The middle of Kapelye sat around and composed Nagunim. And I'm assuming, like for example, we assume they composed Pata B'Shalom. We assume they composed the Neder Salolo. It's a reasonable assumption to say that they were trying to come up with a song for Purim, and they chose even of all things. Why they chose that niggin? Who knows? I just made that up. I have absolutely no basis for it. But this niggin, the Lubavitch Chassidim sing, the fact that we sing it on this pasuk, it makes sense, but it doesn't make it true. It just makes it sensical.
No. The part when we said the part about Ahasuerus being like another word for Hashem, meaning Hashem, then it makes sense to say that part.
Right, but that I didn't make up.
I know.
But the niggin, where the niggin comes from and why we sing this niggin is very interesting.
Like the rubbish upbringings, was it sung with these words?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Depends how fast you sing it. You know, if you're at a number speed, you can't say the words anymore. But yeah, we always sang B'mei Achashverosh. The Rebbe came into the Megillah, we say B'mei Achashverosh. Go ahead.
Can you clarify the two parties Ahasuerus made? I don't understand.
He made a party for 180 days for all of his ministers, for his political class, for the people. You must understand, if you're ruling the whole world in a time when communication is not faster than the motion of a horse, there's no telegraph, there's no telephone, there's certainly no email. You are trusting a lot of people to be loyal to you who are thousands of miles away. Right? Now they're going to be loyal to you because they're afraid of you. Number one. They're going to be loyal to you because you make it worth their while. Number two. And they're going to be loyal to you because you're going to remind them periodically, I'm in charge. That's very, very serious. To run these kinds of empires, and the Persians did it quite successfully, and according to the Goyim, a far longer time than we give them credit for, but they did it for a long time. You need to be incredibly, incredibly politically savvy. So he made a party for all these people. That's what he did. Made a 180 days. He was making sure that they would never forget how much fun they had in Shushan. Then he made a party for the locals, for the people living in Shushan Abin, and that was for 7 days. And it was this second party that the Yidden were mishtatif.
Wasn't he like higher than them? Like, why would he make a party for the locals?
Because it's all part of politics. It's all part of politics. It's part of showing off, which is a form of power. and it's keeping people under your heel. I mean, he didn't do anything because he was a nice guy. That I guarantee. Because he wasn't a nice guy. You don't become Achashverosh for being a nice guy. Okay, now the Rebbe has a sikha, of course. One of the psukim is chur kharpas escheles. The Navi describes the incredible lavishness of his party, the expense that he went to, the kind of wealth he dispensed in these parties is exorbitant. It's pushed crazy. So there's my Maimonim on it, and the Maimonim I don't know off the top of my head, but I know the Sikha that the Rebbe spoke about Fabrengen Tav Shlam and Gimel, which has been shown many, many times. And what the Rebbe said is, it is a lesson in this. The lesson is that every person has to use whatever Hashem gave him in his Avodas Hashem. If you were given greater wealth, you have to use it. If you were given greater talent, you have to use it. And the Megillah is teaching us the lesson of using whatever the Eibishter gave you by describing how lavish the feast that Achashverosh made to demonstrate the need of a person to use whatever wealth he has, whatever, not just wealth, whatever gifts he has in the beautification of the Eibishter's world, in serving Hashem. There's a story with a chassid, and I forgot which Rebbe at the moment, was a rich chassid, was a Chassidish Yid. A Chassidish Yid learned and davened and they served Hashem, and the chassid came to his Rebbe and said, what should I eat every day? He was a wealthy man. And his Rebbe told him that he should eat alle Tag weiße Brot und Fleisch, mit Fleisch. You should eat meat every day. Meat, not chicken, meat. And white bread. Now today white bread is considered unhealthy. In those days white bread is considered the food of rich people. And the chassid was very taken aback. He was wealthy, but he was an oiv, he was a serious Jew. And he came to the Rebbe and said, what should I eat every day? And the Rebbe said, you should eat like a prince. You should enjoy your food. And he made some kind of a comment to the Rebbe. Why would the Rebbe tell me to indulge like this? What about a skafia? And the Rebbe said, if you'll eat every day meat and fresh bread, the poor people in town won't go hungry. It's simple. If this chassid is going to do a skafia, what kind of a skafia you think he's going to impose on the people who have less than him? The Rebbe said, you eat wealthy, rich. What about Avodas Hashem? The Avodas Hashem is, if you eat so well, the people around you who need your help will have something. If you're going to be busy with the skafia, you understand how is it going to project on others? You understand? And it's one of the lessons of the Megillah that the Rebbe says. In the first Pedic, we had this very, very elaborate and detailed description of the wealth that was dispensed to teach us this lesson that whatever you have, you got to use. That's why the Eibishter gave it to you. Of course, on a nigla level, this is already a Gemara. And now that I'm sitting here and talking, I realize instead of doing it to my mother, I should bring in the Gemara Megillah. Do you know that there is no place in Shas like this, as far as I know? In Masechta Megillah, there's pages and pages, mamish, pages and pages and pages of Gemara. That Pasha translates the Megillas Esther line by line, like a medrash. Yeah. I don't know of any other Masechta in Shas, any other Navi, Sefer Tanakh, where you have such a sequential interpretation of the Navi. It's a story, right? And he goes through word by word, line by line. Starting with the question of Achashverosh, was a Melech Chacham or a Melech Tipish? Was Achashverosh smart or stupid and all the rest? Push it line by line, it goes on for 5 or 6 dafim, and they're big pages. Because when you have Haggadah, you have very, very little Rashi and almost no Tosfos. So they're massive pages, goes through the Megillah, push al HaSeder. So of course one of the things is Vashtiya Chados. If the drinking was kados, ein einis. The law in those days was that you were not allowed to refuse a drink. If somebody offered you a drink, you had to take it. And Achashverosh said, ein einis. If you don't want to drink, you don't have to. He made it very liberal. The rule in that world was somebody offered you a cup of wine, and it wasn't like Bartanuda, you understand? It was wine. It was wine. Which means it made you drunk. You were not allowed to refuse it. You had to drink it. It was considered disrespect. And here's a feast. He said that people die, and he made ein einis. No one can force you to drink. And of course, it says later on, kirtsein ish va'ish, according to the will of each man and man. And the Gemara says kirtsein ish va'ish means Haman and Mordechai. In the second feast that Achashverosh made, he got CHK, both sides. It was so kosher that there wasn't even politics about the kashrus. It was as kosher could possibly be. It was to satisfy Haman. It was to satisfy Mordechai. And of course, as we learned from the Gemara, the entire feast was considered a chilul Hashem. The Yidden participating in the feast of Ahasuerus was considered a tragic Chilul Hashem. Why? Oh, the Rebbe brings this. They went to the party. Did they have to go? So we can declare whether they should have gone. But the Gemara says, the Rebbe talks about Nasiches. The problem wasn't that they went to the feast of Ahasuerus, it's but that they enjoyed it. They were flattered and honored and delighted by the fact that they were invited to Ahasuerus' feast. And that was the sin. The sin was, it's the same story of that entire period. The belief that the Jewish people are no longer different than everybody else, and the proof is in the pudding. They are treated like regular citizens, like any other citizen of that civilization, and nobody sees the Jewish people as different. And for the Jewish people, this was the ultimate redemption, or to say it tragically, the ultimate Golus. The ultimate Golus is when a Jew sits in Golus and thinks it's Geula. I've talked about this many times. I probably told this to you also at some point during this year, that Golus Bavel is a very, very strange Golus. Golus Bavel is a very, very strange Golus. I'm talking Pashut Pshuta Shamika. I'm not talking on some Kabbalistic level. On the one hand, Nebuchadnezzar, who came to Yerushalayim twice, the first time he pillaged it, the second time he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash and pillaged it again, and he killed millions of Jews. He killed many, many people. But there's something ironic about Golus Bavel, that when the Jews who were not killed, who were taken away in chains and brought back to Bavel, they were not kept in chains. They were made into high society. Understand that from the time Yeshua came into Israel until Golus Bavel is almost 900 years. It's 850 years. Okay, it's 850 years. From the time Yidden came into Israel, I think it's exactly 850 years. Until the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, 850 years. You know what happens if you leave Jews in one place concentrated 850 years? You know what's going to happen to Israel in 50 years from today? Forget about it. Economically, they're going to be way ahead of the whole world. Technologically, the whole world is going to buy our technology. They're going to hate us, right? They're not going to buy our roses because we're apartheid state, but they're going to buy our technology, our little tiny chips. Yeah, the Yidden built an empire of incredible financial success, and the greatest Chachamim, the greatest universities was Yidden, understandably. So Nebuchadnezzar and all of his hate took these Yidden to Bavel and put them in his cabinet. It's mamish amazing. There's a sefer called Daniel. You ever heard of Sefer Daniel? Yeah, the Sefer Daniel is really about Nebuchadnezzar more than it is about Daniel. In the Sefer Daniel, it describes Nebuchadnezzar taking Jews to Bavel, and he divided his kingdom into a few sections, and he put a Jew in charge of each one. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Why? Because he wanted his king. He wasn't an idiot. He was a Rasha. He was a bad man, but he wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to kill Jews to spite himself. He was going to put Jews in positions of power in the belief that A, they'll be loyal to him, and B, they'll make his civilization prosper. And they did. So Yidden come to Bavel, think about this, arguably as slaves. And when they come to Bavel, they're not treated as slaves. They're treated with great respect, incredible respect. Because people respected their intelligence. People respected, this is a very bad word, but I'll say it, you'll forgive me for saying a bad word, their culture. They expected their way of life. And they incorporated them into the high society. And of course, does anybody know what happened consequently? For this, you have to read the book of Ezra. There was a tragic assimilation. The whole thing is 70 years. They got in Semaise from the Churban Beis HaMikdash till they allowed them to build the second Beis HaMikdash a second time was 70. How long is 70 years? It's more than 70 years since the Holocaust. That's how fresh it was. And the number of Jews who married Goyim was indescribable. Ezra Sefer is taking Yidden back to Eretz Yisrael, and at one point he writes in his book, it hit me how many Goyim I'm schlepping. He said, I didn't realize myself. When he left to bring the Jewish people back from Eretz Yisrael, he left them in Yochasim and Bavel. He knew there was a problem. The pure Jews he left in Bavel. He took with him only the problems, but he didn't know how severe the problems were. In America, there were no Gedolei Yisrael. In America, there were no Gedolei Yisrael. In Bavel, there was Daniel. You heard of Mordechai, yeah? The assimilation was tragic. So as the Gemara says, the Midrashim explain it. The name of the Jewish people until that point was Ivri, Yivrei, Hebrew, in whatever language you want. And when the Jews in Bavel saw what was going on, they became split into two nations. And the Jewish people who fought against the assimilation took a new name. They took the name Yehudi. Yahud in Arabic. Jew, Juif. Yehudi does not mean from Shevet Yehuda.
Wait, the ones who fought?
Yes, they changed their name. Yehudi means, the Gemara says, Kol HaKeif B'Aved Zara Nikra Yehudi. That in the story of Esther, the Jewish people who defied, who denied, who opposed idol worship, they are called Yehudi. And Mordechai is called Ish Yehudi. What Ish Yehudi means? The master of the movement. Mordechai was the head Yehudi. He was the Rebbe of the Yehudi movement. The Jewish people who saw the assimilation, and it was a very good assimilation, because it wasn't assimilation with a sword, it was assimilation with a smile and with an invitation and with an embrace and inclusiveness. And of course, to them, the ultimate expression of that inclusiveness was being able to participate in the meager 7-day feast that Ahasuerus made for the people of Shushan Abida. The Jewish people were invited, and they went. And again, the Lashon HaGemara is Nehenu Misudase Shalei Rasha. They delighted. It wasn't the food, it wasn't the sushi, forgive me for saying it. It was the participation. Huh?
What was the other group called?
Ivrim. The name of the Jewish people was Hebrews. We were called Ivrim. Yehudi was a new name adopted by Mordechai and his followers, who came. There's two different Gemaras. One Gemara says, Kol HaKeif B'Aved Zara Nikra Yehudi. Anybody not really Yehudi. And the other Gemara says, Kol HaKeif B'Aved Zara Kilu Meidem Chal Torah Kula. Any person who denies idol worship automatically accepts the whole of the Torah. Meaning, even if many of those Jews, Yehudim, were not so frum, by the virtue of the fact that they put a stand, we're not assimilating. We oppose the pagan ways of the Persian kingdom as it was, the Persian empire as it were. They're automatically considered frum. They're automatically considered Meida B'Chal HaTorah Kula. That's the story. Now, the tragedy of the Purim story, it's exactly the same thing that happened in Europe. The tragedy was that at the time that the Jewish people thought mamish, you know the old joke that they tell about the horse? You know the joke about the horse? There was a guy who decided that feeding his horse is too expensive. So he's going to cut back on the rations. So he reduced by half. Oh, okay, the horse is eating less, and the horse is still seems fine. So after giving the horse half rations, a month later he gave him a quarter rations. The horse is a horse. They don't know how to complain. Bottom line is he finally reduced the horse's rations to nothing. Finished. The horse doesn't have to eat. The day he reduced the horse's rations to nothing, the horse dropped dead. So the Jew comes to shul lamenting. He says, I finally taught him not to eat, and he dropped dead on me. You understand? The Jews in Persia, and this happened in Germany, who finally believed that they were looked at exactly the same as the non-Jew. On that day, Haman showed up. On that day, Hitler showed up and reminded them the ancient message, Yeshnei Am Echad. The Jewish people are different. And we're not only surviving better, we're respected more. If instead of attempting to assimilate and enjoy being the same as the Goy, we understand, Chavre, it's not our choice. A Jew is different than a Gentile, the way a dolphin is different than a porpoise. You can't do anything about it. They're different creations. God made them different. And a Yid has to understand that. One nation of Goyim, another nation of Goyim are people. Yidden are different. They're different, whatever the reason is, but they're different. That's what the story Haman says. There's a nation of people who insist on being different. And the Purim story should teach the lesson of the futility of an attempt at assimilation. When Jewish people try to assimilate, it always ends up the same way. I want to share something with you, and then I'm going to let you go. In the last 300 years, the Jewish people came up with two answers to anti-Semitism. And this is the truth. There are two great movements that were meant to be answers to anti-Semitism. That's what they were meant to be. The first is the Reform movement. The Reform movement started in Germany with the belief that if Jewish people are German enough, they'll be seen as Germans. That was the philosophy. Their quotable quote going back to that time, we're talking times in about Shem Tov yet, is to hey Yehudi b'veisecha v'adam b'tisecha. Be a Jew at home and a mensch in the street. Don't flaunt your Jewishness. Don't show your tzitzis, don't show your yarmulke, don't wear a beard. Don't speak in Hebrew. Be German. And the Germans look down at Eastern European Jews. German Jews would tell you straight, I'm German first and Jewish second. The root of it was not secularization, it was not precursus, it was an idea to combat anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, the maskilim, the reformers, who were very, very smart, were apocursim, and along with this philosophy of dealing with anti-Semitism or assimilation, they destroyed Jewish faith, the Jewish soul. I mean, Reformed Jews, what's Reformed Jews? There's nothing left of Reformed Jews. A bunch of goyim who've been converted by drinking, I don't know what, by eating, I don't know what, kosher chocolate, I don't know what it is. It's a very, very tragic movement. The thing is, it ended in the gas chamber. That's where it ended. It ended in the German telling the German Jew, there's nothing German about you. Nothing German about you. And it's literally a repeat of the Purim story with a tragic end. The second great experiment of combating anti-Semitism is Zionism, which is the right word for Zionism is nationalism. Nationalism is a movement that in the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, was considered very, very honorable. It's me against you. I'm Irish. I'm proud to be Irish. And I'm going to fight for the Irish, and I'll die for the Irish, and I'll kill you for the Irish. Yeah, I am Slavic. I am whatever. The Highlanders in England, what are they called? Scottish. I'm Scottish. I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. It was very, very cool and popular to be a nationalist. After the Second World War, the Nazis were nationalist socialist parties. They were. Nationalism became a big sin because you're supposed to be a multicultural. You're supposed to embrace everybody and not separate yourself unless it comes from God. Now, why is that not racism? It's not racism for a number of reasons. First of all, because anybody who wishes, as long as they're sincere, can become a Jew. And second of all, because you can't change it. A Yid can never become a Goy. It can't be. It can't be. The greatest demonstration of the inability of a Yid to become a Goy is the Purim story. Okay, l'chaim.